don't we jump right into the big topic today, NVIDIA's unlaunch of the RTX 4080 12 gig.
Amazing.
First of all, for context, guys, NVIDIA announced the RTX 4090, 4080 with 16 gigs of RAM, and 4080 with 12 gigs of RAM at the same time. But they were, as they have done in previous generations, planning to stagger out the actual availability of these cards as well as any specifics when it comes to performance as measured by third-party reviewers like Yo. What that means then is that this card was not really, it was announced, but not necessarily actually launched. And the reason that there's been a controversy and the reason that NVIDIA has come out and said that we're not gonna go ahead and launch this was that community members felt that the naming for the card was very misleading. And honestly, I feel exactly the same way. This is exactly what you and I talked about back when NVIDIA launched the GTX 680. So that was like
a lot of
8 years ago, 9 years ago or something like that. And the reason that we felt that way about it was that the GTX 680 did not feature a top tier die. It didn't feature a big die version of Kepler. It actually featured a size down die compared to the previous generation Fermi flagship, the 580. And so for us, we were looking at it going, hey, we couldn't help noticing this is more of like a 70 class card. What's the deal with that? Because NVIDIA has traditionally, at least until quite recently, reserved their 8 number, whether we're going all the way back to, the 8800 GTX. Even the 8800 GTS, I believe, used the G80 die, if I recall correctly. So typically, they reserved the number 8 for their top spec chip. And it wasn't until the 680, as far as I remember anyway, I could be a little fuzzy on the details, that they went and they took a tier down chip and were like, yeah, you know what? We actually managed to improve performance so much generation over generation that we're going to take a second tier chip and we're going to brand it as a flagship. So I do object to any naming scheme that seems to be designed to intentionally mislead the consumer. Now that I think about it, we probably should have taken AMD to task for skipping a generation, going from 5,000 to 7,000 with Ryzen. I find that sort of behavior extremely, extremely frustrating and unnecessary when it could be as easy as, hey, the first number, is the generation of product. Now, I think the justification for that is that there was a Zen 3 Plus 6000 series refresh on mobile or something like that.
It's often mobile. NVIDIA does the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They'll launch at just mobile, or I think one time it was like just Best Buy or something.
Yeah, well, they completely ignored, I believe it was GTX 300. They went from 200 to 400 because, I don't know, except there was, as you said, like an OEM-only card that you could get in like a Lenovo pre-built or something, but it was actually a 200 series and it was rebranded. So there was no reason for it to exist at all. And people are pointing out in the chat that they actually skipped twice because they also went from Ryzen 3000 to 5000. So they're just like, yeah, we're advancing really fast here. We're really pumping out those new generations.
All you're really doing is racing to a point where you're going to have to come up with another naming scheme, and that's going to be annoying.
At least do what Intel does and, launch that non-generation in between. Okay. That's not entirely fair. That's not entirely fair. So the point is that I object to any naming scheme that seems to intentionally obfuscate what the product actually is. And when you call this card, this 4080 12 gig, when you call it a 4080, the implication to me, the consumer, and I mean, in the last generation, they did use a top tier chip for their 80 card. The implication to me, the consumer, is that this is a top spec piece of silicon.
And the only difference is the RAM capacity.
But in actuality, based on NVIDIA's own first-party benchmarks that showed the 12 gig version underperforming the 16 gig version by up to 30%. So the reality is that this is a 4060 Ti, realistically, is what it actually is. If we were to look at all the different tiers of silicon that NVIDIA produces and say, okay, yeah, 80 is top, 70 is often actually top but cut down, but sometimes a next one down. And 60 and 60 Ti things start to get a little bit murky. In fact, there have been situations where they've actually used different dies for a 60 or 60 Ti class product, where like it's a big one that's cut way down or a smaller one that has all of the features functional. So if we're being realistic, this is like a 60 Ti class product at best. And maybe with the new making room for, the 90, okay, maybe it's a 4070, but I think that it's pretty clear that this was misleading. I think a lot of members of the community felt that it was misleading, and we've got to at least give NVIDIA credit, I guess, for once again, unlike some other mega corporations, at least having some shame. When we took them to task over their treatment of hardware unboxed, did they or did they not reverse course?
They did.
Okay.
Sure.
When Hard OCP took them to task
is it shame?
Hold on.
Or is it damage control?
When Hard OCP took them to task for, what was it, Project Greenlight?
I don't remember what it was, but NVIDIA. I remember this happening.
I believe it was the Greenlight program where they clamped down on overclocking partner cards, which was one of the considerations for EVGA dropping out of the GPU market. How are you supposed to differentiate your product if you can't even differentiate it because NVIDIA says no? So like the boring dad program is more like it. Actually, they didn't really back down on that. Okay, fine. So they backed down on one thing and now a second thing.
Yeah, it's just damage control. I don't think it's shame.
Well, I mean, that does demonstrate a little bit of shame. We've certainly seen other companies.
I think it's financially attached.
Like, I don't think...
That's what I'm saying with damage control.
Could have some financial shame. Okay, so here. For example, okay, Apple has been shamed...
I don't think they're going, this was wrong, I feel shame, I'll take the hit on this and fix it. I think they're going, this was a bad move by us, which will financially not be a good thing for us to do. Let us adjust this so that we make the more monies.
I don't even know if there would have been a financial impact. Because at the end of the day, the consumers who actually look at benchmarks and watch or read reviews are going to know how things stack up. The FPS per dollar is what it ultimately comes down to.
Don't do that.
Plus some features, right? And for the people who don't do that, they were just potentially going to buy a cheaper die and think it was a 4080.
I
don't think there's a financial
My assumption
loss.
is that they would do that and then people would rage. And the rage would turn into potential sales for
5,000 series or 6,000 series or maybe 7,000. Maybe we'll skip two numbers.
69,000 series.
Yes, sure. Whatever it might be.
Let's go. Just do it, AMD.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't think NVIDIA feels shame. Personally.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
I've watched them do many a thing that should result in shame, and I have watched them just not care at all.
Yeah. In other news, they literally turned their apology into a marketing exercise showing lineups of people to buy 4090s. So, okay. I guess that really is more supportive of your position than of mine. But at least they unlaunch. If they turn around and they launch this thing as 4070, I'm still going to be disappointed because I still think that's BS.
You think it's a 4060 Ti?
I think it's a 4060 Ti. That's what I think it is. I think that fully functional, maybe it's a 4070. If the 4080 die is like a 4070 Ti at some point, like if we get a Ti for a small price uplift halfway through the cycle, I mean, you got to assume NVIDIA's planning on that now.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think NVIDIA intended to slow down their release of new architectures of GPUs from like every 12 to, well, maybe like 15 to 18 months. Actually, they used to come even like inside a year, like way back in the day. But I don't think it was their intention to slow down from a yearly cadence-ish to like 2 to 3 years.
True Scott in Flowplane Chat said, what about the board partners, though? What about them? NVIDIA, as far as I can tell, does not care.
No.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think there's exactly 0 Fs given by board partners. Man, you know what we did not do a good job of spelling out? We did a video. Has it gone up yet? I actually don't remember. Maybe it went up. Yeah, it went up.
Let me check.
Yeah, no, it's up. It's up. We did a video on using an ARC GPU as a coprocessor just for AV1 encoding.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty sweet video. But we actually were really focused on if you had a last gen Nvidia card and you don't need additional performance and you don't want to pay $900 for a 4060 Ti with the wrong label on it, right? That was kind of the angle for the video. But what we really should have done was we should have focused on, hey, this is the one feature that just kind of kills AMD cards. Their encoder just has not been as good historically, and apparently it's been improving. I know I keep saying that we need to take a closer look at it. Apparently it's been improving. My understanding is it's still not on par with NVENC though. So maybe what we should have done is positioned it as the solution to NVIDIA is AMD plus Intel. Which if I'd told you that like 2 or 3 years ago, you would have told me I was an idiot.
Yeah.
Right? But
it'd be cool.
But with how much cheaper an equivalently performant Radeon card is right now, right? For like a 6800 or like a 6700 right now. Man, those things absolutely rip. So if all you need is a good video encoder with how much cheaper they are, that's actually a totally viable alternative. Man.
Someone in Full Plane Chat said maybe they're trying to avoid lawsuits like the GTX 970. I think that's a completely different situation.
Yeah, that's a different situation. For those of you who are not up on that, basically they had a version of the 970 that was 3.5 gigs of the 4 gigs of memory ran at full speed, and the last half a gig ran at a reduced rate, and it was because of the memory bus width on the card. And functionally, it made very. I honestly felt that they should have disclosed it for one thing because they knew, but I felt that one was a bit of a nothing burger in terms of performance because the reality of it was that the 970 was not such a performant card that you were going to reach the very limits of how much data you needed to put in its VRAM without running into other bottlenecks on that card.
It was still BS.
Like it was.
But I hear you.
Stupid.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah.
But.
Apparently it was all 970s, not a version.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 970 4 gigs.
With my memories.
Sorry, yeah. So the 970 compared to the 980, which was full die or which was a wider memory bus or whatever, had that like issue or something like that. Yeah, so they knew and it was bad, but it also didn't really affect performance except in some like very, very weird edge cases.